Hey guys, I'm Genius Phoenix123, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to create objects. So, yeah, in my last episode, I covered paths, scripts, and fonts, and I explained what shaders are. We're going to skip timelines for now, because I'm not sure I know enough about them, but we can get quite a long episode out of objects, so we'll focus on that. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is, of course, create your object. There are several ways of doing this. Right click, create object, press this button here, or click resources and create object, or shift control O. I usually just use the buttons up here, so we'll click the button there. We've got our object. Like with everything else that we name, we're going to have a prefix to it, and that's going to be obj underscore. If you don't understand why we use prefixes, please go back to my sprites video and be sure to check that out. I'm pretty sure that I have now created a playlist as well, containing all of my GameMaker tutorials. So if you go over to my channel, which will be linked or in the description, or if you click on my profile picture underneath the video, it'll send you to my channel. And if you click on playlists and GameMaker tutorials, then that will be that there. You can ignore my liked videos playlist, because it's mostly just things that I like to look at. But anyways, okay, so obj underscore, we're going to be doing it for the player, so we'll say player like that, and that's our sprite named. So if we click OK, you can see that's now called obj player. This white square here will usually have the sprite in it, but because we haven't set a sprite in the sprite box here, so the way you set a sprite is you either click on this box here, or you click on that box there, and then you select your sprite. You can also, so we'll set it to SPR player, as it's our player. You can also create a new sprite, or you can edit the sprite that your object currently is. Other things, we're going to be focusing on the section here, not events and actions yet. Okay, so the other things in here are these 4 checkboxes. Visible, which you want to be on unless you don't want to be able to see the object. So the only reason really you would have this off is if you're having, like, I know, a menu or a networking. Actually, you'd keep it on for menu, like a networking or something object in your corner, and you want to have it off just in case. But you want to be able to see it in your room editor, then you can click visible off, and you won't be able to see it in your game, but you will be able to see it in your room editor. And that's the same with, like, walls. So if you want to have more than one type of looking wall, because they all do the exact same function, there's no like real reason to go through and just like create a bunch of objects and then have to code out that you don't want the player to collide with these objects and all of that. So if you just make it so it's just one object that the player collides with, and then a lot of sprites that you can put over that object, but you don't want to be able to see the object, so you check visible off. But we want to be able to see our player, so we'll keep it on. Solid is not really used unless you're not using physics. So we've got solid and uses physics. Don't use them together, because it sort of clashes. There's not much point in solid, really. So we'll just leave that. Persistent means that it will stay the same, so all the variables will be the same, all of the like sprites will be the same, and all of that. So say you wanted to have a leveling up character, instead of having to transition your level from one instance of the object to another one, it's just the same object in different rooms. It's also used for like doors. So when you go through a door, it will send the player back to the door that it came through, or something like that. So we'll keep persistent on, because we want to be able to keep our player throughout all of the levels. And the only other thing for the checkboxes is use physics, which I'll explain in a second, because you get this second menu up here. So I'll keep that off now because we don't need it yet. Depth is sort of the layer of which it's on. So the higher your depth, the further back. So it's hard to explain. So if you guys use like text editors or like PowerPoint or something like that, you know how you can send images forwards and backwards? Depth is sort of like that. So if increasing, so 0 is at 0 level, a positive number above 0 is moving backwards, and a negative number below 0 is moving forwards. And this is mostly used when your characters or your objects collision boxes, hitboxes, are smaller than the actual sprite, because then you get this weird overlapping thing that looks a bit strange unless you change the depth of all the different objects. Parent. So the parent is to do with, well, I don't know what I've done there. Don't know what that button does. The parent is to do with, so you have to have another object for parent, really. And what will happen is, unless you've got a code action in here, or an action from one of these up over here, these drag and drop actions, in an event that so the parent has events and actions that it carries out, and the child of the parent, so instances with parents are known as children. So the child of the parent, if it has its own event, then it will play that event, but if it has a different event, then it will use, like, if it doesn't have the event that the parent has, the parent's event will happen inside of this object. So say we had a parent which was PAR underscore, so that's the prefix for parent, life form or something. You could then code into that like a def system if your HP hits 0, and then you can create multiple children which all look different and all have slightly different code in them, but they all die in the same way, and it's just sort of a quicker way of making sure all of the objects that use that code have the same code. So we don't have any other objects, and we don't need to use any other objects for our player at the moment, because he doesn't need a parent. Everything will be done inside the player. We may do something later, but there's not much point really. A mask is usually the same as the sprite, like there, but a mask also can't go with uses physics, because the mask is the collision box. You can change the collision box so the mask is like the collision box, and then the sprite is how it looks, or maybe the other way around, I can't remember. But yeah, so children is just the box of how many objects are parented to it, and then this button here, show information, shows you all the information there is to know about the object. So the sprite is, whether it's solid or not, whether it's visible or not, what the depth is, whether it's persistent or not, whether it's a parent of anything, whether it's who its parents is, who its children are, its mask, and whether it's a physics object or not. So if it is a physics object, then it will show up with all of their different, all the settings for that, which we will look at now. So we're not going to keep this on. But the physics properties here consist of the collision shape. If you click collision, so it can be circle, box, or shape. So a shape is like a custom shape that you draw the points out for. Circle is a circle, and a box is like a square or a rectangle. So our sprite is a square, so we'll set it to square. Modify collision shape. You can see we have our sprite there, like that. And that's his collision box at the moment. We can make it smaller or bigger. We won't be using this anyway, but if he was going to be a physics object, this would be his collision box, and we can change it to a circle, and we would need to put it in the center and just make it bigger so it fits him perfectly enough. And then a shape is whatever we want it to be, but we're going to keep it as a box for now and keep it the size of him. You can also change like the horizontal and the vertical snap like we could with the paths. Be sure to go and check that video out, and we've also got all the sub images here. Okay, now moving on to the actual settings. We've got density. So I might have to explain. These are like real world things, so in actual physics. So density is to do with you know, like the density, the mass per volume of centimeters cubed or whatever, or inches cubes or whatever you use in America. Restitution, I can't remember what this one is. I'm not going to tell you what that is. You can ignore collision group. It's everything in the same collision group collides with each other, I'm pretty sure. Linear damping is to do with how it decelerates. So the bigger the number is, the faster it will decelerate. Angular damping is the same thing. It's just rotating instead of going in a straight line. And then friction sort of adds to these two. Times is to the linear damping and the angular damping or something like that to slow down the speed up the deceleration, which sounds a bit of a weird sentence, but okay. So sensor means it can't collide with anything, but if something does collide with it, then it will sense that it's been collided with, and then in your code you can write out what happens then. And start awake just means these settings are in effect, and physics is in effect when it starts, and you don't have to toggle it or not. And then kinematic, I can't remember what that does, so we're just going to leave that. But this is if you want to make a really realistic physics sort of, yeah, like if you want your game physics to be quite realistic, you could set this to the density of things on Earth, and yeah, it can be useful, but it can be quite difficult, and you can do it in different ways as well. It just requires writing out a lot of code, so this is sort of the shortcut to it. But we are not going to be using physics for this project, so we can check that off. Okay, events. So there's a lot of events. If you want to know what they all do, what you've got to do is click up here, help, open the manual, click F1, and then go to using GameMaker, and then events, and it will come up here telling you what all the events do down here. If you click on any of these links, it will tell you what the events do. So yep. The other thing is, so events are basically the when statements. So when this happens. So for example, when the object is created or when the object is destroyed, and then the actions are then do this. So it's sort of like an if statement sort of thing. It's less so when you get to asynchronous. This is just sort of, it's still when, it just tells you sort of what you're doing. Also, the draw event is more of a vessel for all the code that draws out your sprites and text and all the things, but it's not really a when happens. But in here you've got keyboards, keys, mouse buttons. I think this goes, it only really does left, right, middle. If you've got like extra buttons on the side or something like I have, then it's not really, it doesn't show them, but I think you can in the code. You check for whether or not you're using a button that's on this, like button 4 and button 5 and things like that. But we will ignore that for now. Collisions, again, are more physics thing. But other than that, I can't really see anything else that I need to explain too much. So we'll create an event, which is the create event. You can change which event that is or delete the event as long as it's selected. And then we've got actions over here. So really you don't want to be using these. The only one you really want to use is this one here, which is execute code. So you drag that in there and it comes up with this code menu here, code window here, and you code in here things. So I don't know, you could say when create x is equal to 150 and then y is equal to 200 or something like that. But we're not going to do any of that yet. So that's what you'll use most of the time, as long as you are coding. But you've got all of these menus over here that you can scroll through and just look at everything. There's not really much point in doing much of it, really. Particles is sort of something you can't do any other way other than downloading like a GIF or something. Health, lives and score, there isn't much point in using, and none of these are really, you can do most of the functions here in the code. So really just ignore all of them apart from code here and execute code. If you do want to know what they all do though, you can go back into our manual, so press F1, and I've already got it. You can go to actions, but if you go to using GameMaker and actions there, and it gives you a list of all the actions here, and if you click on remove actions, it tells you what all the actions do and how to use them. So yeah, don't need that anymore. I'll keep the create event because we will use that quite a lot. The main events that are used are create and step, and sometimes destroy and sometimes keyboard, and sometimes mouse. So they would be like the main 5 that you would use, but really it's create and step, and that's all you need, and all the others are just, you can do them in code. And so yeah, we'll keep that up there. We don't really need to do anything else. Next time I'll do rooms. I might come back to timelines, but I won't for a while, and then once we've done rooms, and then maybe once we've done timelines, we can we can actually move on to doing some code. So can people please, if you're watching this, go into the comments and tell me what kind of game you want me to teach you how to make. Bear in mind I'm not good at all of them. So the main ones would be platformer, RPG or like a side scroller or something, and I'll try and work those out for you. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comments. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in about a week's time.